Hi everyone, welcome to the Modern Body Podcast. I'm your host, Aly DiRoma, and I'm so happy to have you here. Thanks for joining. If you're coming back again for another week, I so appreciate that. If you're new, happy to have you. Today, we are gonna look at simply what it takes to build and maintain muscle mass. Now, you may be hearing a lot about muscle mass building on social media, or maybe you're hearing about it a lot, podcasts or reading about it in articles. And I think a lot of times that we hear or see, strength training or muscle building, we're thinking that we have to, do this very intense amount of training. We're going to the gym 5 days a week. Maybe we're starting to overthink our protein intake and feeling a little stressed out about everything it entails. But today I really want to focus on the importance of building and maintaining muscle mass as generally a healthy human being and someone who wants to continue to have muscular strength. You want to continue to feel capable and confident in the abilities of your body to do whatever you want to do without hesitation, because I don't know about you, but I don't really want to be that person that someone says, hey, let's go, paddleboarding, and I don't say yes because I don't feel confident enough to do that because I don't have the strength to do it, or go rock climbing, or go take a hike, or whatever it is that you want to do. Not that I'm necessarily going to be conditioned for that, activity or sport, but at least I can try, and I might still be sore and I still might be really bad at it, but I am okay with the fact that I can go and try this. So, that's really what muscle allows us to do outside of our normal daily life. But we also need muscle mass for our normal daily life, even if you did none of those activities. So again, we're not going to think today about I have to start doing this intense strength training program. I'm going to start looking like a bodybuilder. I'm going to be, this big weightlifter or something. No, we can just be humans that lift weights or do some sort of resistance training or do something to build and support our muscles, because it's what we need for our daily life. Just like we need to drink water, just like we need to brush our teeth. These are just common things that we do as normal, hygienic and lifestyle, practices to keep us feeling good and to keep us operating at a baseline of health. To give you a few more facts here to really drive home the importance of muscle building and muscle maintenance for everyday life, for the everyday human, is that starting at the age of 30, we, and when I say we, I mean men and women, we begin to lose 3 to 8% of our muscle mass per decade. And this is happening naturally. So if you were to do absolutely nothing outside of the scope of your normal daily life, you would be naturally losing 3 to 8% of your muscle mass per decade. But the good thing is we can do something about that. That doesn't have to be the case. That doesn't have to be the statistic for you. We can start to implement training, whatever you want to call it, workout, exercises, movement into our life that is going to help us prevent this muscle loss every single decade. Because again, the truth is, throughout the history of humans, this has been true. It's just becoming more apparent now than ever, or you're hearing about it more than ever, because so many of us have a lot of physical issues. Or I shouldn't say so many of us have a lot of physical issues. I could say that a lot of physical issues can arise from a few different factors. One being, number one, in our modern day lives, in our modern culture, we don't really have to move our bodies much at all. So we lack physical movement in our lives. We also lack a connection to our physical bodies. We're very mind-focused, or a mind-focused culture. We use our minds much more in our daily lives, like right now in this modern time, than people did, 50 to 100 years ago. It was much more of a physical labor force that we would have to do a lot more things. Because if you think about it, okay, we order we can order pretty much everything online now, or if we order it, we can go pick it up, or, whatever the case may be, we don't really have to use our body in its fullest capacity anymore. I always say we've been quote unquote convenienced out of movement. I don't know if that's even a word, but it's true. Like, our lives are convenient. I personally don't live in an area where I need to use my body that much. I kind of need to drive everywhere to get to the grocery store, to just, do simple errands. I don't live in a walkable city. So if you do, great, you're already getting more movement into your life. And this is why now it's even more important than ever that we are consciously and deliberately placing movement and exercise and training, whatever you want to call it, back into our lives. And the funny thing is, our bodies really are designed to be moving, to be in motion. They were built and meant to move. Now, it seems like moving our bodies is this big chore and this big inconvenience. And we see it as this separate part of our life instead of being part of our life. And I get it too. Some days I don't feel like moving my body. Some days I don't want to work out. Some days I don't want to train either. But I just think of it as part of my weekly routine. Again, it's my personal baseline of health is how I've started to see it in my life, and or something like I need to drink water, right? So I need to make sure maybe I go on a walk, or I do some strength training, or I do a Pilates class, whatever the case may be that I need that day. It's something that keeps me going and keeps me feeling good. And I ultimately feel better when I do it. Of course, we need those days where we have rest days too. And naturally, our human instinct is to conserve energy as well. So that's why, you don't need to be moving hours and hours a day. We could be very deliberate with this. We can be very focused with it and get so much out of a short amount of time of moving, especially when we're doing it on a regular basis. In this episode, we're going to talk about 3 pillars or 3 ways in which muscle building and muscle maintenance can be done and achieved and maintained. So first, we're going to look at some of the science behind it. Then we're going to look at how this is going to be implemented or can be implemented into your own life without a lot of stress, without feeling overwhelmed. And we're going to touch on a few lifestyle factors, but I'm not going to go into that in too much detail today. Looking at the science now behind muscle building or muscle maintenance. The science behind this is called muscle hypertrophy. If you're unfamiliar with that word, hyper means above average or more than normal, and trophy means nourishment, nutrition, or growth. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing above average work to our muscles so we grow them. This muscle hypertrophy is the process of increasing your muscle mass size through the growth of muscle cells. There are specific strategies and ways to do this, and the most simplified way that we're going to talk about is strength training, or I should say resistance training. Strength training falls under the category of resistance training. So when you begin to resistance train, and that's our focus today, is how strength training, resistance training can help us build muscle and create this muscle hypertrophy in our body. So when you are strength training, what you are doing is you are creating these little micro tears in your muscles and your muscle fibers. And what happens is our bodies, as a biological response, they trigger a repair of these muscle fibers. And when that happens and the muscle fibers start to be healed, they grow back larger and stronger. So this is a process of the muscle is getting broken down and then it's getting built back up. And this is called muscle protein synthesis. And over time, with enough consistency, your muscles will grow and increase in size. And this is how we gain muscle mass. Now, the structure, that's the second part of this. The structure of how you're going to do this is important because just doing, random workouts and exercises here and there, while yes, it might help you build muscle or maintain it, But if you really want to be focused on, okay, I have not been, let's say we're a beginner, I have not been strength training for a while, and I want to start really to consciously increase my muscle mass and get stronger. You're going to want to follow we'll just say like a program or a structure. And we can talk about the structures in terms of, weekly timelines and also training cycles. A training cycle for strength training, for muscle building programs, is going to be at least 6 to 8 weeks. You need at least 6 to 8 weeks in order to grow your muscles consistently. So consistency is very, very important here. But ultimately, we're talking longer than 6 to 8 weeks. That's just your initial period. So if you start strength training and it's been 2 or 3 weeks, but you're not like really feeling, you're going to feel changes if you're looking to see aesthetic changes, those are going to be different timelines. You're going to feel changes right away, because if you go from not strength training to strength training, you're going to feel something, right? But ultimately, we're going to lay a foundation here for strength training that's going to take us beyond 6 to 8 weeks. When we're talking about this, we're talking about years, life. We want to be strength training regularly and consistently for long periods. So in order to do that, the number one way to do this is with your form. Making sure that your form in your exercises is high quality. This is that quality over quantity training that I've talked about before. And that means that, okay, you understand the mechanics and the alignment that is required for the exercise. You understand what muscles are being used. You understand also how your body is responding to them, like what is going to work for you and help you get the most out of that exercise. When we do this, we're going to increase the longevity of our training. So maybe you're going to be able to do it, for years and years and have no issues, because you're also going to become less injury prone. So yes, you can still become injured. It can happen to anybody, but your likelihood of injury decreases significantly when you are very aware and conscious of your form. It is much, much better to do 5 high quality squats than to do 20 of low quality squats, because your body is going to remember those 5 high quality squats, and then the next time you go to do them, you're probably going to be able to do 6 or 10 or whatever. It's going to slowly increase over time. When I'm also talking about form, it's also important to note that using your body weight at first to get that form really well in your body is important. So a lot of times when I'm doing a strength training class on Modern Body, in the warm-up for the class, I mimic some of the movements that are going to happen in the sets, because I want your body to be primed and ready and have that high quality form before we start adding more weight and load to your body. So this is going to help you move more safely, more effectively, get the most benefit from every single repetition that we do. Plus, it's going to bring your awareness into your own body and, okay, what are the adjustments that I need to make? Because this is all going to be still highly individualized. Now, other than the form, so form extremely important, quality over quantity, let's talk about the structure. Okay, because again, we don't just want to be doing like whatever workouts here or there. We want this strategy in our programming. So we're going to look at things like, okay, the frequency, how many days of the week am I doing this, and the volume of training I'm doing, so how many reps am I doing or sets I'm doing within that frequency. Then we're gonna look at the weights and the loads, of your dumbbells, or maybe it's your body weight, because that's also resistance training, your body weight. We'll go into that more in a minute. Okay, number 1, frequency. I recommend, and it's not even just me, it's if you read any literature about this, at least 2 days a week of strength training is going to be really your baseline of strength training. I would say that's the bare minimum you would want to do. So again, if you're someone that has not been strength training for a while and you want to start again, I would start with 2 days minimum, maybe even 3 if you have the time and you feel like you could take that on. So on Modern Body, I always schedule 2 strength training classes a week because I believe, and it's not even that I believe again, it's proven that to maintain your muscle mass or even to build muscle mass, you need to be regularly and consistently strength training. So whether that's 2 days a week or 5 days a week, that's totally up to you and the goals or the outcomes you have for yourself that you want to achieve. But I always am adding in 2 days a week of strength training for members and myself, although for myself personally, I like 3 days, because that's what's going to, if you did nothing else, help you maintain or start to slowly build some muscle mass, but also slowly build consistency over time, because that is also going to be a very, very beneficial aspect of your training, is your consistency. And I'm not just talking weeks, I'm talking years, but not to get ahead of ourselves, let's just talk like within a week. Okay, so typically when we're talking about a training cycle, not only are we looking at how many days a week, but how many weeks are in your training cycle. So, 6 to 8 weeks is when you're gonna start to gain muscle mass. Typically, training cycles for strength training can be anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, and then you may have like a deload kind of rest week in between your next training cycle so your body can recover. This is important to know because we wanna have that consistency for many weeks in a row, for maybe years even, if that is, possible for you, which, really it's possible for most people. So again, you don't have to be doing 5 days a week of strength training. You can do 2 to 3 days a week and still gain muscle mass or maintain muscle mass. Within that frequency of strength training that you're doing, you're gonna also have to consider your volume of training. This is going to be the sets and the reps that you're doing within each training session. So a set of exercises could be, any amount of exercises. It could be 3, it could be 8, it could be 6, whatever. So a set would be a cycle of those exercises done 1 round through. That would be considered a set. So a set is an amount of exercises that are grouped together. And then your repetitions are the amount that you're doing each individual exercise. So we'll just say 10. And what is recommended is for a beginner to do at least 1 to 3 sets of exercises, 8 to 12 repetitions through. So for example, on Modern Body, the majority of our strength training classes are a circuit style where you're gonna do about a 2.5 to 5 minute warm up, followed by 3 sets of exercises. Maybe there's 4 in that set, maybe there's 6 in that set. And each exercise is gonna be done typically 10 times through. So within a class, and then we'll finish with a cool down. So within a strength training class, you're gonna be doing at least 30 repetitions of each exercise. You're gonna hit that same muscle group, whatever the muscle group that is being focused on or targeted in that exercise, at least 30 times. This is recommended because when you're doing lower load training, which we haven't really talked about loads yet, but this is a strategy to where if you're hitting that muscle group at least 8 to 12 reps, if you're someone that's been doing strength training for longer, it's usually recommended that you do more repetitions and or you could just increase your weights. Again, we're gonna talk about that in a second. But you wanna do a certain amount of sets that is gonna bring your muscle close to failure, because as the muscle gets closer to failure, the muscle fibers are breaking down more. And that means that that muscle protein synthesis, that repair and rebuild that's gonna grow your muscles stronger is going to increase. So that's how we're increasing our muscle mass, is as we're getting closer to failure. On Modern Body, I do the 2 days of strength training week, like I said, in our normal regular routine. But I also have a specific program called Simply Strong, which is an 8-week training cycle where you're doing 1 day a week of an upper body strength training class, circuit style, 1 day a week of a lower body strength training class, circuit style, and that 3rd day of the week is full body. It's taking the exercises from the upper body class and the lower body class and putting them all together. So within the course of 1 week, you're doing more than 30 repetitions of each exercise. You're doing more like 60 of each exercise, because even in that full body class, I'm making sure that you're hitting that muscle group at least 30 repetitions. So this is how we're really gonna start to build your muscle mass, and or if you're someone that already has muscle mass, maintain it over time. So that's the structure of frequency and also reps and volumes that is proven to show muscle growth over time. The third component of this though is the weight, or is the load that we're working with. And this is gonna be highly individual. Number one, I wanna put this out there that if you're someone that hasn't been strength training for a while, or even doing any, very structured physical movement, that you can start with body weight, because body weight is a type of resistance training that's using the weight of your body and the force of gravity to do the exercise. And it is still proven that if you take an exercise close to failure, it's typically a 1 repetition before failure-ish, then you can still build muscle. You are still building muscle, because it just depends on as you're getting closer to failure, and that's gonna be different for every single individual wherever you're at in your life. So weight training or resistance training using your body weight could be enough for you right now. If you are gonna start to add weight and load, we wanna do this very mindfully, very progressively. So for example, if I haven't been strength training for years, I'm not gonna start with like a 20-pound bicep curl. I'm probably gonna start with 5 or 8 or 10. Something that feels more like a medium challenge is how I describe it on Modern Body. But if we're gonna be technical here, it's gonna usually be about 60% of your maximum load. So we're gonna start a little bit lighter, because what's more important to me is your frequency and then your load. So I would rather see you do higher quality movement more frequently, then start to add on load. So this is called progressive overload. So in progressive overload, we're gonna start with perhaps a lighter weight. So we're just gonna say 5 pounds. So maybe, my first week of strength training, I'm gonna use a 5-pound dumbbell, and I'm gonna be able to get through the entire exercise. And by that last set of exercises, I'm getting close to failure, then I know that I'm in a good range for my weight. Okay, so maybe we stick with 5 pounds for, let's say 3. Then I start to, 5 pounds is starting to feel pretty easy for me. Okay, maybe I wanna do an 8-pound dumbbell bicep curl. Okay, that's starting to feel like a challenge now. Great, so 8 pounds is good for me for the next maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it is. And then you're like, well, 8 pounds is starting to feel light. Maybe I should start increasing my weight again. So I start with a 10-pound dumbbell. Okay, wow, that's starting to feel like a really good challenge. I can still do the entire set and I can do all the repetitions, but by those last few reps, I'm starting to feel like it's really hard to make that bicep curl happen. That's how I know I'm getting closer to failure, and that's how I know that I'm at the right weight for my body. Now, progressive overload can happen within, weeks of time, but you could also work on it in the span of 1 class. So I like to do that for myself. So we usually do 3 sets, like I've said, of exercises. So typically in the first set, I will start with a weight that I know is like that medium challenge. So let's just say like a bicep curl, 10-pound dumbbell feels pretty good. I can easily do that set though. All right, so maybe in my next round, I add a couple of pounds. If you have that available, you could use wrist weights or something. But if you don't, you just have like a 15-pound, then you're like, okay, I'll try the 15, or maybe you do 5 reps with the 10-pound and you add 5 pounds for the next 5 reps. And you're like, okay, wow, that was a challenge. Then maybe in the third set, you're like, I'm gonna do 15 pounds the whole time. And that is really taking you close to failure. So that can happen within the course of 1 class. So I like to do that as well. And I'm always suggesting to members that are taking class, like play with your weights, move them around. Maybe you started too heavy, maybe you need to go down a little bit. This is always gonna be an ebb and flow process. Some days I'm gonna feel a lot stronger, some days I'm gonna feel a lot weaker. Just kind of depends on other factors as well outside of class. The other way that we can create this progressive overload is by changing up or putting variety into the types of exercises we're doing or the way in which we're doing them. So number one, we just talked about progressive overload. Now number two, we're talking about the way in which the exercises are done. So sometimes in classes, I will throw in some pulses, some end range pulses or mid-range pulses in maybe even the last set of our exercises, which really you can feel that work. Sometimes I'll put in some isometric work, which means we're gonna hold a position, which means our muscles do not get a break. And when you're starting to put in these, what I say, like little bits of fun into your training, then you're also really starting to build that muscle mass because you're challenging your muscles to do more work, but in the same amount of time. So there's a lot of different ways and strategies in which you can do that. So it can be weights, it could be pulses, it could be the isometric work, it could be dynamic changes as well in the exercise. So say you're doing a squat, for instance, and you're always doing a squat at the same pace, at the same amount of time. Well, what if you went down slowly in your squat where you bent your knees and you sat your hips back and you pushed up quickly, or you reversed it. You came down quickly and stopped yourself and you pushed up slowly. That is gonna ask your muscles to work differently and respond differently, which is gonna make your muscles start to break down a little bit differently and then they can rebuild. So those are all the factors that are gonna go into your structure. So number one, your form. Number two, your frequency. Number three, the volume of reps. And then number four, the weight and load. And then number five is gonna be the selection of exercises. Now here's the most important part. How are we gonna put this into our life? How are we gonna implement this easily and seamlessly? Now, at first it might feel like it's an extra task to do because it is technically, right? We're adding something into our day that we haven't before. So we're gonna need to carve out a little bit of time for that. But going back to what I do on Modern Body is I keep the strength training classes 30-ish minutes. Sometimes they're a little bit less, sometimes they're a little bit more. So 30 minutes, most of us can find a 30-minute pocket 2 days a week to put some strength training into our week, or maybe you're gonna do 3 days a week. So it's really not that big of an ask for most people. Of course, there's different circumstances, whatever your lifestyle is. So putting this into your weekly schedule could be pretty easy. You don't even have to go to a gym. You can do this at home. All you need is a set or two of dumbbells and a space to move, maybe a mat. You could also follow, another strength training program where I have that Simply Strong 3 days a week of strength training, 30 minutes or less, and in between those days you're doing Pilates and mobility classes to help give you more of a well-rounded training program so you're not starting to feel stiff or like you're overworking one area more than another. Other small factors that we'll just plug real quick about, muscle mass growth or maintenance is there is a nutrition aspect to it. I'm not going to touch on that a lot today, but your protein intake does play a role in your muscle building and your muscle maintenance. Maybe we'll have a podcast episode about that, but if you did want to increase or make it more rapid, I should say, the muscle building part of your body or the system, you're gonna wanna make sure you're eating enough protein. That can be from plants, that can be from animals, whatever works for you. And there's a range there of how much protein intake you would wanna have from your nutrition. And usually that amount is 1.2 to 1.6 if you're gonna start to measure that and calculate that, but I don't want you to overthink that right now. Let's just think about how can we put some strength training and build some muscle into our week. So again, let's not overcomplicate the nutrition part of it. If you did nothing, if you changed no part of your diet and you just started strength training, you're gonna build muscle, period. The other part of this is recovery and sleep. You definitely need to take some time off in between your strength training sessions so your body can recover, so your muscles can rebuild and come back stronger. So again, the biggest thing I would like to emphasize here is your consistency over time. It takes a long time to build muscle, And this is why we're gonna think about it as a lifestyle practice and part of our lives rather than seeing it as a chore and separate from our lives. All right, now go about your day. Maybe you're gonna start to build some strength. Maybe you're gonna start to think about, okay, what strength training can I do? If you are interested in trying out some strength training classes on Modern Body, you can go to www.modernbody.io and you can check out the strength training classes that we have. Get your Pilates in, get your 2 days in a week of strength training, your mobility work, your natural functional movement, and start to develop your lifestyle of movement as being part of your life rather than separate from it. I hope you enjoyed this episode today. I hope you are able to walk away with a little nugget of information or take some action into your own life today. And it would mean so much to me if you took a moment to leave us a rating or a review or even shared this podcast with someone if you're enjoying it. That would really help me out and help us reach more people. So again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope to have you here next week. We're going to have a new episode next Friday, and have a great day. We'll see you then.